Although these subjects that we discuss are so vital to us, far more meaningful to our daily lives than we can imagine, which includes the one we're going to go into tonight, which is the subject, the topic, the idea of standing all alone. Do you have any idea of what that means? When you have gone through dozens of shocks and hurts and confusions and turmoils and bitternesses and resentments and hatreds properly instead of improperly, which you have done up till now, then maybe you'll catch a glimpse of what it means to stand, and I want to emphasize the word completely. Totally all by yourself in this world. First of all, let's get our level straight. You can't be dependent of the man who grows potatoes or of the woman who makes dresses or the man who works on the electrical circuit of your house. Obviously, we're very much dependent on each other for these daily needs. So we can get those out of the way, that we need each other very much in that. When are you going to stop having allies and friends and teachers and guides and advisors, and especially when are you going to stop having someone who is stronger than you? See, look, unless you are standing all alone, psychologically, spiritually, do you want to use that word? Unless you're standing all alone, you will never know the truth. You'll never know what it means to be unafraid. You'll never know what you could have had you started out, and I'm going to give you some ways to start out a little later. You'll never know what it means to be yourself. You'll always be baffled in the smallest matter of life. You'll be baffled as you are now, in small matters of income, how you're going to earn your living, how you're going to get by financially or socially. Don't you understand that this is what unhappiness is? To not know, to not see, to not understand small things. Small things. Should I tip the waitress or shouldn't I? Should I make that phone call or should I write that letter or shouldn't I? And the worst friend, quote marks, the worst ally, the worst authority we have, look where it is. Right up here. All day long today, you have been giving yourself advice. Have you not? You've come across one situation after another where you have to make a decision of some kind. And if you couldn't find someone to ask how to do it or what to do, you consulted your own mind and we're left exactly where you were before, even if you made a decision. The decision was made not in clearness, not in understanding, but on the mechanical level where you simply had your choice between one or a dozen choices, and you just made it and prayed that it came out all right. I'm telling you this evening that when you understand, when you practice, when you live from your own thoughts, from your own feelings, even from your own physical body, when you live from that, you will have no confusion whatever on any level. Then there'll be no choices at all. Except on the everyday level. You might like whole wheat bread instead of white, or corn instead of tomatoes. Then you make that decision. And even that might cause you trouble sometimes. So that you reach a point where, listen, because you understand clearly what this is all about, all these things we're talking about, you understand that it is possible for you in this mad world to live sanely, clearly, without compromise, without asking anybody anything. You understand, do you not, that as long as you continue to ask someone about these things, I'm not against asking questions. We're not talking about that for now. As long as you ask someone about this or that, you're not going to find out for yourself. You're going to simply go along in your own lazy way, never once challenging yourself, and therefore never once catching that first glimpse of how you can be free of your own mind, of your own thoughts, of your own opinions. What a marvelous thing it is to be free of my own convictions, my own beliefs. Because when I see what they have done to me all my life, I see what they also see, what they've done to you. I see both with equal clarity. And because listen to this, because I'm no longer consulting my own sickness, I'm no longer consulting my own neurosis, I no longer consult your neurosis, your sickness. Understanding what it means to not be who I used to be, I drop it right now. Who did I used to be? Who did you used to be? Think. You'll see. You'll see for yourself, just as I'm talking here. You'll understand what we're getting at. I used to be a spiritual person who went to church regularly, who memorized sacred books, who knew certain prayer. Oh, I used to pray, remember? And hope that God would answer my prayer. And at the same time I was so-called praying, I was in desperation because I sensed that it was a false escape. I used to be a person of strong convictions. Boy, could I argue. Remember? Remember how you could argue about politics, about social questions, financial questions? and you never once noticed the hard, neurotic tone of voice, your cruel manner, your out-of-control emotions, your stupid words, and your hell. Did you? You didn't see it, did you? This is because you were still someone. This is because you, quote Marx, knew who you were. This is because you, quote Marx again, had the answers. So, being a slave to your own conditioned thoughts, acquired thoughts, distorted thoughts, being a slave to them, this was the only world you knew, right? This is the only world you knew. Someone looks at you wrong and the only reaction you know is to snap back. Remember how you can snap back and used to snap back? Okay. Only knowing this world for yourself, you only knew this world in other people. And this is the madness of the world. Because, see, if Mr. A, I'll say this lady over here, no one knows who I'm pointing to, talking on the tape, as an example. If this lady is real sick, she will like a sick man on the other side of the room. He will like her. I'm talking about a certain psychology, not physical appearance or anything like that. Because like does indeed attract like. Now they're slaves of each other and hurt each other. Up to this point, I've described society as it is. But I'll add one more point. Every person who does not stand alone, I'll change it again. The less an individual stands alone, the more he will live in delusion and imagination that he does. And woe unto society when this man by accident or fortune has power. Because then he'll ruin everyone as much as he can in the name of goodness and God. In the name of social reform, he'll destroy the world. This is the way the world is. Have I described you individually in any way? I have I not? So what are you going to do about it? Or maybe you're afraid to break the pattern. Now I'll tell you something. Listen. There is no fear, no anxiety, no doubt, whatever, in standing alone, in really standing alone, honestly standing alone, which you will know when you have it. There is apprehension, hostility, anxiety, when we live in imagination of standing alone. How many people have you heard remark, "Oh, I have an independent mind. Nobody tells me what to do." Similar statements. The very saying it, of course, is a denial of their independence, or they wouldn't have to say it in the first place. Which do you want most? This is serious business. Serious. This is your life we're talking about. This is why I want to come close to you tonight in this thing. Which do you want most? Your friends, your husband, your wife, your children, your parents, your organization, your group? Which do you want most? Them or real freedom, real independence? Now, again, when you listen to this, which do you want most? Mechanical religious ceremonies, things you've read in a book that you practice because you think it's going to make you spiritual? Do you want imaginary spirituality? Do you want imaginary freedom? Or will you bear the shock of breaking out of yourself, of breaking out of your imagination, of transcending imagination, which always disguises itself as reality? Imagination will always disguise itself as reality, and so we believe a lie. You've heard that phrase before, haven't you? We come to believe a lie. And if I am believing a lie and you tell me that, I will prove that I'm believing a lie by getting mad at you. Society, every individual in society has a sign across their chest, invisible, but it's there. Don't touch me. In smaller print, let me live in dreamland. I'll tell you something else. This might sound, you might get several emotions from what I'm going to tell you next, but it's quite necessary to do this, and very healthy and very good and very cheerful, very everything that is good. You may get a feeling of a little bit of shock, or you might even think it's funny. The person sitting next to you in this room, whoever he or she may be on either side or in back of you, in front of you, the very person sitting next to you in this room could be the one person who could keep you most out of this inner kingdom. The world and its delusion takes organizations and certain heroes and certain teachers as their salvation, which is simply laziness, and to use a stronger word, cowardice. If you follow any religious teacher, I must tell you, you are a coward, and you'll never find yourself. If you think any man is a great man, you've sacrificed yourself. I'll tell you when you can know a great man, and you understand the term I'm using that in, when you were great. It simply means that light recognizes light. And in that there's no boasting and no superiority, but simply a recognition, and a very, very quiet recognition. You can start standing all alone, untouched by the world, which is the same thing, you understand, I'm sure, as being untouched by yourself. because you are indeed your own world. That is what your world is, what you are. How do you define the world? When you describe the world, you are describing yourself. When you look out at an insane, mad world, hurting each other, fighting each other in violence, if you can see it without self-reference, you're seeing it sanely. But if you're blaming it, you're not free of it. You're simply describing your world. If you are angry, openly or secretly, suppressedly, or resentment, see, I want to use synonyms, otherwise you'll sneak out of it and say, I don't get angry. That's because you've used another word. You're resentful or hostile. You're doing the perfect thing for keeping yourself standing with the mad mob, which will destroy you with one word, which can destroy you with one facial expression. Because that angry look is still in you. You start tonight. I'll give you a little project to work on. Then we have something else to work on a little later after the break. You start tonight to make small decisions for yourself. And don't you dare say, I already make all my decisions for myself. You have no idea how Mama is still making your decisions for you. How Papa is making them. How that 6th grade school teacher is still making them. How society as an organization, one kind or another, is still making your decisions. Have you ever made a decision and saw how foolish it was? Haven't you ever questioned it when you've made a wrong decision? You start making small decisions on your own without asking anyone else for advice. Oh, please, I said small ones. Because if you start making big ones, arrogance will creep in, and you'll say, well, it's about time I start making decisions for myself, and you'll do something dumb, which means that you've been carried away by a secret desire in back of this decision that wanted to call it standing on my own 2 feet, and then you just get into trouble. So you start with small ones. How about generalizing a little bit and saying your first small decision is that you're going to make your decisions for yourself. And if some other human being tries to dominate you, you're not going to fight with them or anything like that. But you're going to say, as much as it scares me, and as much as I'm not used to it, I'm going to start thinking for myself. You each have your individual life, and you'll have to find your own examples for this. You start to observe where throughout the course of a single day, you're either asking someone for advice or you swallow it whole when you see the news broadcast or hear that person making a very authoritative statement. And because you're so lazy and gullible, you accept it as fact because you're released from thinking for yourself. Start making the decision tonight that you are not going to be the cause of your own unhappiness anymore, because you do it to yourself. I do it to me, and nobody else. How many times have you been told to rise up in emotion and refuse to let any other human being hurt you, influence you, con you, sweet talk you, promise you, reward you, punish you, etc.? You're going to lose a lot of your friends, and you're going to change your relationship with every human being with whom you now have a relationship. And it's about time. Unless you prefer to live the way you presently live and grow older and finally die without having what you could have had. If that's what you prefer, then you can do that. But if you want this other world which exists, this other life which we're talking about, then you cut every human being out of your life right now. Do you know why? For one thing, so that you can be a decent human being to this person you have a relationship with. That is why. Aren't you ashamed of your behavior toward other people? What right do you have to spread more cruelty in this cruel world? Don't you have any conscience at all? That is why you have to cut them out of your life. Do not listen to them anymore, so that you can begin to stand on your own and become a real human being who will then not hurt your wife or husband anymore, or your children, or your employees, or the stranger who you can make a sarcastic comment with, too, in the car or on the telephone, because you know that you'll never see him or her again. And no one will ever know that you made that cruel comment. Or thought, that vicious thought. To stand alone means you have a conscience. That you're a decent human being at last. And that's what we're aiming for. And that's what we'll do. We're going to do something quite interesting now for the last half, which is to try to make a certain connection, and I'll explain it just as clear as I can, but you'll see as we go along. What we're going to do is try to define certain human conditions, define it, see it from the higher viewpoint. Make a connection there. You'll see what we're getting at. Not only that, but I'd like to ask you to please bring tomorrow and Sunday, either or both, your own examples of what we're talking about. I have a number of examples that Joan will read in a minute. Example. You see stupidity in yourself. You see stupidity in another human being. Take an extreme case, sometimes clearer to see when you take an extreme case. Stupid behavior. Have you ever observed stupid behavior in yourself? Huh? Have you ever observed stupid behavior in someone else? And you knew it was stupid, right? All right. From the higher viewpoint, from what we're talking about here, how would you define stupidity? You look at a person out there in the world, and he does a dumb thing. You say, what a dummy. What a stupid man or woman that is. All right. Now, how would you say the same thing non-critically? That is scientifically, that is esoterically, that is saying it so that you're defining it from the higher viewpoint in order to see it clearly. So there's no judgment in it at all, no superiority. So this is what we're going to talk about and discuss now. And Joan will read out loud some examples that I wrote down. Go ahead and read them one after another, Joan. Out loud, please.
Define the human condition from the higher viewpoint. 1. Stupidity is unawareness of self and life. 2. Artificiality is the fear of abandoning acquired errors.
Now, let's slow down. Read that again, please, and listen to it.
Artificiality is the fear of abandoning acquired errors.
Stop right there. Sit down a minute, Joan, would you please? Read it once more and listen to it, because we're going to discuss it a little bit.
Artificiality is the fear of abandoning acquired errors.
Is that clear? You understand it or not? Don't you understand it, or do you understand it? What keeps artificiality in place? First of all, are you aware of yourself when you're being artificial? No? Then that's where you have to start, obviously. Trying to make an impression on someone, which does not mean you go to the other extreme and displease them or something like that. Read it again.
Artificiality is the fear of abandoning acquired errors.
Boy, I'll tell you. All right. You're not aware of your artificiality, some of you say. Can't you just watch, for example, your physical manner, the expression on your face? What are you trying to tell me by your posture, for example, which you may be quite unconscious of? That would be an artificial behavior pattern. All right. That will keep errors in place because they're connected, because I'm trying to tell you who I am, that I'm right, or if I get angry, I'm keeping my artificiality in place, and I'll do it again tomorrow, and I'll do it the day after that, because I have not caught the artificiality red-handed and dropped it as not being really me, which it is not. It's not me at all. This is the imposter that makes me tense and miserable and afraid of you. And I'm not going to live that way anymore. Even if it means, listen, and you'll make the connection on this, even if it means the death of me. And if there's everything we're striving for in this group, it's the death of, quote, me, which is artificial personality. Read the next one, third one.
War and violence are actions of the unconscious masses.
That's the definition of war from a higher viewpoint, isn't it? Read it again.
War and violence are actions of the unconscious masses.
All right, you tell me, can a conscious human being physically attack another human being, or could he be part of a war, cause a war? Yes or no? Can you be conscious and slaughter other human beings? Yes or no? Can you?
No. No.
Then people who fight wars, who start wars, are unconscious human beings, right? Therefore, they are their own punishment, right? Therefore, they will lie about the cause of war, right? Always lie about why they must destroy the next nation, right? 4, I think it is.
Stubbornness is ignorance masquerading as willpower.
Stubbornness is ignorance masquerading as willpower, and we got Dorothy on that one. Stubbornness is ignorance masquerading as willpower. All right, now you've seen examples of this, have you not? Woe unto us when we have convictions and loyalties and no one can move us from them, because they've become a part of the hardened, artificial nature. Oh, do you have any idea, I don't mean this to discourage you, but to enlighten you. Do you have any idea of the suffering that we have to go through to crack this hardness that we have, that we don't even see? A different kind of suffering, though. Suffering which we are intelligently using to put an end to both the hardness and the suffering. You should welcome hell, which you are not doing now, because you don't have the courage to walk into it, to face it. The hell, you know what the hell is? Seeing who you are, what you really are, what a big phony you are. So that we can destroy the phoniness that has been torturing us all these years. Right? Read that one once more, then go on to the next one, please.
Stubbornness is ignorance masquerading as willpower.
Next.
Sarcastic criticism is a substitute for understanding.
That one is fairly clear, is it not? Sarcastic criticism is a substitute for understanding. When I don't understand something or don't want to understand it because it's a threat to me, I will reject it in one way or another, one of them being sarcastic criticism, unless I want something from you and fear to offend you. Then I'll pretend to agree with you or do something else to keep your goodwill toward me, and because you're as gullible as I am, you'll believe that I'm nice. But the sarcasm and the criticism will be underneath. Some of you may have, quite unknown to yourself, or maybe known to yourself, criticized sarcastically some of the things you've heard at these meetings. That was your defense, and that was because you're afraid. You're afraid that the truth is going to take away your artificiality. Why don't you let it? Why don't you let it? So the nightmares will end. And the madness up here, so that the madness up here will come to an end. You don't like living with that, do you? Nothing bad can happen to you as a result of dropping all these hardened concepts, ideas, which make you who you are. Only madness can result. The man who thinks he's Napoleon is simply an extreme case of identification, whom they put in a mental hospital. What hardened identifications do we have, including the identification that you should treat me nicely. You can behave like an animal and demand things and be cruel and tricky and vicious. But I can be that way. I can be that way, cruel. But you must treat me nicely. That is hell. That is madness. That's insanity. Drop the demand that anyone should treat you nicely at all. They're not going to anyway. What they do give you, even on the everyday level, they give you out of compulsion. or out of trading, or out of mechanical goodness. A person who is mechanically good is a person who wails over the hungry, who wails over the poor, who cries for the downtrodden masses. That man, that woman is sick, and that man or woman is the cause of the masses being hungry and downtrodden. And the downtrodden masses themselves are masses of neurosis and sickness. Read the next one.
Repeated mistakes are a refusal of something higher than the mistake-making human machine.
Again, please.
Repeated mistakes are a refusal of something higher than the mistake-making human machine.
Clear? Read. No, John. Read the next one.
The next one. Perseverance is the sensing of being on the right road at last.
Now, isn't that a nice cheerful one? We have a cheerful one among all the other hard ones. Read that again.
Perseverance is the sensing of being on the right road at last.
Which is the beginning of standing all by yourself, free of everyone. Because now you're not standing alongside anything, but you are being the truth itself. And that is not standing, that is division. You're standing alongside truth, there's you and truth. When you sense that this is right, this is the beginning of self-unity, the beginning of the ending, as Fred talked last week, of all these multiple personalities inside of me. Beginning of there being just one thing here, and therefore nothing opposed to it. Not this mad world, not being fired from my work, not growing older. One thing, and therefore nothing opposite to it. Therefore no contradiction, no self-division, no hypocrisy. Therefore essence. Therefore no conflict. Well, what's the number of the next one?
8.
You read 8.
Evil is anything unconscious that should be conscious.
Evil is anything unconscious that should be conscious. Therefore, that expression on your face, which was negative and you didn't see, is evil. Because it was unconscious. You understand? Because it was against you. All evil that I have in me is against me. Because evil is one thing. Evil is unified two. I'm angry, I burn me, and I hurt him. One thing. I destroyed in me, I cease to hurt him. Various topics that we cover here in the class have their own characteristics, their own nature. Some of them have to do with emotion more than thought, more than intellect. Some have to do with intellect. more than feeling. Various topics have their own nature. Sometimes they're shocking and must be. Sometimes they're simply informative. Sometimes they leave us more confused at the start, but then because we've gone into the confusion and understood it, then we come out a little bit higher in understanding than we were before. This morning, the nature of what we're going to talk about is very happy. I don't think you could find a subject that is more cheerful, more truly positive, more delightful than what we're going to go into. It should give you a feeling of relief, of lightness, of feeling all the more that this is what you've searched for all your life, and you have finally found it, the beginning of the road, that you've found it. What we're going to discuss is the idea of making a new start in life, a fresh start. And obviously the first thing to do is to get out of the way, very briefly, false concepts we have of what it means to make a fresh start. Because in the past we've all made the resolution that if I can just get divorced, or just get married, or just move to another city, or just adopt a new philosophy, that will be a fresh start for me. And after the thrill wore off, as it always will, we saw that we were the same person we were before. We've come right back to where we started. We see that we are indeed in a circle. Everything repeats itself. The exterior scenery alone is the only thing that has changed. Which, because we failed to take that end of the road properly, we go into despair and therefore further increase the treadmill. Become harder, become less flexible, and less able to get out of it. So we'll discuss this morning what it really means to make a fresh start, which you should know by this time is always something that is internal. It comes as a result of you, of me, turning my attention inward, not egotistically, not to put my attention on myself so as to keep my old habits intact, but to begin to dissolve them through understanding the whole process. Each one of us in this room, thank heaven, can indeed, in fact, make an authentic, fresh start in life. We could have done it 10 years ago had we understood the things we're going to understand this morning together. Or you can do it as you're sitting here in this room. You can do it before the break, before you leave here. You can make a fresh start in the first small way. How? Through, with great emotion, finally coming to the point where you realize that compromise is no longer possible. That compromise is no longer possible. Which means I am going to have to see, without any question about it, as much as it scares me, and it will scare me, that truth, reality, God, cosmic consciousness use what term you want, will absolutely not bend to my neurosis. Not 1 second, not 1 ounce, not 1 inch will this truth, this other thing I want and need desperately, will not give in to my sickness, to my demands. Which means a crash. It means a terrible fear of self-destruction. Which means a terrible but necessary decision to say, God help me, understanding that truth will not compromise with me in any way at all. It will not bargain. It will not plead. I have to stand right in front of it and let it, truth, God, operate on me as it wishes and as I need it to do in order to restore, to find mental health, spiritual health. Which means I yield. Which means 10 times as much fear in me as I ever saw before. Because I sense this is the end of me. So what do you do? What do I do? In the face of this deep realization, this frightening realization that I can't lie anymore. The letter that Joan read is a good example of lying, unconscious lying, of keeping me in place, calling myself certain things, giving myself certain labels. What a horrible position I'm in, right? Thank heaven. Boy, talk about a cheerful topic. This is it. That I'm forced at last to come to the end of my self-deception, which I've unconsciously labeled courage, conviction, standing up for my rights, and all the rest of it. I finally see, heaven help me, I no longer have a choice, except one choice, which is to give up. Completely give up. Which means the beginning of the battle of my life. Talk about your struggle in the outward world to establish a career or to become someone or to get a home and a family with a nice wife and husband and Thanksgiving turkey on the table. Talk about all your scheming, which it was, by the way, and planning and compromising to get that. That is nothing at all compared to what we're going to go into now, because the internal struggle must be done all alone, as we talked about last night. You can have so-called allies in increasing your business or becoming rich or famous. You can have all the allies and friends you want out there, because evil gathers together to accomplish their earthly aims. You're all through that if you want the other thing we're talking about. Being internal, it is individual, personal, and you're all alone. Not only do you have a new kind of what you call horror, but you have to face it all alone. If you even begin to do this, I will consciously call you courageous. That is what courage is, to enter into this terrible thing. Sensing, and sensing rightly that it's entering it, going through the hell, or going back to the lie. Now, see why this is so nice and so wonderful? Having seen that I don't have any choice, that is, I have just the one choice of entering into this or going back to the lie. See how beautiful it now becomes? Do you see how easy it now becomes? How effortless? I leap into it. And there, the destruction which is necessary, the destruction of my artificial personality, the destruction of my self-righteousness, all goes on as part of the work of the light. It does it for me. If I put myself in the position for it to work for me, it will do it, which will wrench me, which will make me cry out and scream. And what you will be screaming, I will give you this advanced information, then when you go through it, you'll understand. You will scream, but what is happening to me? What will become of me? You don't know it yet, but that is a wrong question which you can just drop if you wish and save yourself a lot of grief. Just drop the scream. Because screaming, what will become of me, is part of the illusion that there's someone there that something bad can happen to. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that the most encouraging thing you've ever heard? That all the fight, all the struggle is unnecessary. So seeing that I can't compromise anymore, that I can't lie anymore, I begin the work of dissolving what I've called myself. And we have provided hundreds of details and suggestions and techniques and ideas by which we can accomplish this purpose of self-dissolution, self-dissolving. So that I'm so no longer being who I thought I was. I no longer, listen to this, I no longer had the problems I thought I had. Not even the problem of finding God who can save me. Think about that. Are you in despair that you've never found truth, God, reality, this higher state? Why don't you drop your desperation over finding it and see what happens? Then you will have it. Then you will have God by being God, because you are separated from truth by asking, how can I find truth? I can never find truth. I can only ask the question and bring my conditioning into the question, which will remain unanswered because it's a wrong question to begin with. When I cease asking the question, really cease asking the question, something else enters, which is insight, which is seeing. And remember we said before, then I am not seeing anything. We use the figure of speech, seeing, but that implies me seeing something. The time has come when I no longer see something, because that's division. But then there is an understanding which is not a seeing, but which is it itself, which is understanding itself, which is purity and non-division. So I can make a fresh start through remembering all these things we've talked about up until now, but to get to a major point, which, when you see, you will make a fresh start 10 times a day. The reason we have to do it 10 times a day at the start is because we forget ourselves, and we fall back, and we make mistakes. We grab onto the old conditioning which has held us in place so miserably all these years. We're still the prodigal son, the prodigal daughter, forgetting our cosmic home and wandering off into the field. So we have to come back a dozen times a day, maybe 50 times a day. And that is a success in itself, to see the necessity for coming back. Because if I get angry today and justify the anger and immediately blab to my husband or wife or anyone I can grab to help them become my ally, then I've blocked the path to returning back. Because that means I prefer my self-justification to the truth itself. What blocks me from coming back is ordinary thought operating in its various ways. And I will generalize a little bit and then get specific. What prevents me from making a fresh start right now is the interference of ordinary thought operating in its various ways. How does ordinary thought operate? Imagination. You were nice to me yesterday, and I felt secure in your niceness to me. You didn't leave me yesterday. You sat and watched television with me last night, and we had TV dinners together, and it was a wonderful evening, and our hands touched. Therefore, I want it again today. That is imagination combined with desire, of course, operating. So when you announce that you're leaving, that you're no longer going to be my friend, I ruin my opportunity for staying free by falling into imagination of last night, and the sex too, by the way, that we have. I ruin it by falling into ordinary thought, this time operating as imagination, which is also thought operating as memory, which is also feeling operating and wanting the same thrill again, which is also a fear of losing what I've called myself, because that was a pretty nice night last night, wasn't it? Especially after the 2 drinks, where I did indeed, because alcohol works that way, it begins to break down what we call our inhibitions. When I can detach myself from any form of ordinary thought, when I can drop it, that is the fresh start. Because having put an end to the mechanical role of the emotions, the thoughts, the mental movies of last night, and the rest of it, I am no longer there to remember anything about last night or 20 years ago or tomorrow. I am not there at all, am I not? Am I not absent? Because I exist only in ordinary thought. Ordinary thought always says I, or me, or you. Without that, I'm not there. Therefore, I'm free. But that means the death of me, doesn't it? And that means the end of the anticipation of the pleasure tomorrow that I had yesterday. I said about 5 minutes ago that when we enter into this deeply, the one great terrifying cry that we have, which is unconscious, by the way, you don't even know you're saying it. I'm telling you now so that the next time you say it, you'll hear yourself saying it. The cry is, but what will become of me? Drop the question and find out. You'll find that the question, as I said before, was a wrong question. Don't you understand that this suffering person, this anxious person, this terrified person has no existence at all? It has a pseudo-existence and the wrong operation of our psychic system. When, for example, imagination does indeed replace now. When imagination replaces now, imagination being in time, in memory, in yesterday, and in tomorrow. I mentioned before the break, or before the meeting, a particular kind of experiment that you could work on to begin to see where the false sense of self leaps in to interfere with now. And I've seen it many times in this room, and I'm sure you've seen it in other people and perhaps in yourself, which is what we might call a blocked response. A challenge comes up to you in some way or other, and you become blocked. And I'll explain to you why you become blocked, why there's no immediate perception and immediate free and conscious response. This goes so fast, you have to watch it. Someone challenges you in some way or other, any way, whatever. Already you have ruined your fresh start. You've ruined a clear response by falling into ordinary thought, which has 50 answers. So while this other person has asked you the question, and you're looking at them face to face, you're in a terrible state because you have 50 answers in the grab bag of memory, but you don't know which one is going to save you, which one is going to serve you best to keep you and your self-pictures and yourself in place. So it's a terrible thing. Which one should I grab? And I may grab the wrong one, but I've got to decide fast because he's looking at me waiting for a response. And if I pause too long, he'll sense that I'm searching my memory, and he'll know that I'm in thought. He won't be thinking this, but he'll be sensing it. This is what is known as needless self-concern. Why don't you stand there and leave the time open? Leave a blank space in your mind. Instead of grabbing for this indignant response, self-centered response, tearful response, bitter response, mechanical response, the whole thing. Why don't you be so alert, so attentive to yourself, that you're able to block it in a new way. That is, stop the response, the habitual response, from coming up, which is your fresh start then. So that the stage performer, the dramatic stage performer, the actor or the actress does not leap on stage, but just stands there, letting the audience do whatever it wants to do without any concern, whether it's going to throw tomatoes or applaud. Whichever happens, you will take both of them consciously without falling on you, because you are not there in the situation. Because you have understood at last that when you are there in the situation, there's tension and anxiety and self-defense and offense and plain old misery. So make a determined effort to make a fresh start as often as you can during the day. The more, the better. And you'll be captured and you'll fall back. You'll understand what that means, won't you? You'll fall back into the habitual reactions. But the minute you do, the minute you blunder, you're not going to make a mistake on top of that by condemning yourself. You're going to see it and refuse to respond in a blunder to your blunder. You're not going to pile one mistake on top of the previous mistake, which is breaking the mechanical flow, which is the fresh stuff. This means that finally, in small ways at the start, but growing in strength and in understanding, it comes to you and it comes to me that in fact, and an astonishing fact, that I can and you can actually respond, to use that word deliberately, from a different and a higher place in myself, which is God, truth, essence, consciousness, call it what you want. That actually does exist in me, and look, and it is available to me the minute I have the courage to not respond as I always respond. Which means I'm going to have to slow things down so I can catch it. I have to look at me. I have to look at me the minute I say something, the minute I feel something, the minute I do something. I have a contact with you. I have to be watching at the same time I'm talking with you, so that my attention is indeed out there and in here, which means it's not divided, but I'm seeing the whole of it, which means I'm not going to react wrongly if I see it fully, wholly. Because truth with a capital T does not make mistakes, does not fall into despair. I do, but truth doesn't. Wouldn't it be nice to live that way? Wouldn't it be nice after all these years of struggling, of hating, of bitterness, of concealed confusions, not knowing what to do about finances, about sex, about home life? Wouldn't it be nice to know that the entire thing can be cleared if I'm willing to do what is necessary? And what is necessary is for me, for you, to cease being who you have always been. Simply means to cease being a slave to myself and to be an individual who through hard and persistent work has found this other place inside of me that's always been there. One final word, then we'll stop. So it's going to take courage on my part, on your part, to drop argument, to drop tears, to drop self-righteousness, to drop fear, to drop gloom, to stop bitterness, drop bitterness. The whole mess that has made my life what it is. Because in my present state, I love all these negative things. So we're going to start loving something else. Can you look what an incredible situation it is that you and I, up to this point in our lives, along with the rest of humanity, get it, have loved our misery. That's the way you have lived. That's the way I've lived. That's the way humanity lives. Loving their misery. Effective as of this morning, we will stop it. And if we make a mistake, if we forget ourselves, we'll make a fresh start by coming right back to everything we've learned this morning. To everything which is trying to teach you individually when you make that mistake. So listen to it and put it with the knowledge you've heard this morning. So that the fresh start becomes increased at the beginning. Maybe you'll make a fresh start 20 times a day. Then, curiously, it decreases because you stay awake longer all day long and all night long. Right? So we see what is happening to us. It becomes very clear that something new is happening inside. And then you'll come to meetings every night of the week, if we had them. And you'll read every day, you'll work hard every day. And become a new kind of human being, which is not a word anymore or a description, but an actual state which you are living, right in the middle of that mad office. The assignment was to bring both today and tomorrow, do bring some tomorrow too, please, definitions of the human condition as seen from the higher viewpoint. For example, we said that stupidity, what we commonly call stupidity, is simply unconscious behavior. Evil is unconscious behavior, which means that consciousness and real goodness are the same thing. So we're getting a number of these terms. It'll help us to make good connections, to see things from the higher viewpoint rather than from our own conditioned and lower viewpoint. So we'll start anywhere and have someone read them aloud, then maybe or maybe not we'll comment on them. Let's sort of start over here. Who's the first person over here who has some? Okay, Mark, stand up and read them slowly and clearly. How many do you have? Two. Okay, listen.
Indecision is the fear of making a wrong move. And the second one is blabbermouthery is the false substitute for peace and quiet.
That gets right to the point, doesn't it? Read the second one again. I don't know if they heard your first word there.
Blabbermouthery is the false substitute for peace and quiet.
Okay? Feel free to comment at the end of the reading of any of these if you want. Just raise your hand and we'll discuss them a little bit. I saw some smiles at the word blabbermouthery. Rudy?
Hard,
Would you stand, please, so we can hear it better? And they can hear it.
hard religious attitude is fear and resentment, masquerading as godly powers. Anxiety is gullibility taken as a desire to learn. Blabbermouthery is fear of silence masquerading as acceptable social behavior. Lies in social activity is taken as being a bright person. Wrongdoing is the activity of unconscious humanity.
I like that blabbermouthery one so much. Would you repeat it again?
Blabbermouthery is fear of silence masquerading as acceptable social behavior.
Okay. Comments? Who's next? Over here, anybody? Yeah.
My need for love is my misunderstanding of
All right.
political power is man's weakness in disguise. Sympathy is the absence of goodness in me.
Who will explain, including you, what does that mean? Sympathy is the absence of goodness in me. What does that mean?
Well, real goodness and decency cannot be sympathy.
Correct.
Sympathy is in thought. Thought is the joy of protecting me. My image. All distraught parents are selfish parents frantically operating man's machine. My search for happiness is my inability to face life and self.
That was a very good last one, wasn't it? My search for happiness, which is simply a search for a distraction, for something which will cover up what I've been trying to cover up unsuccessfully all my life. Speaking of sympathy, I don't think we have to comment too much on it, but notice the self-dramatics in people being sympathetic. I am the sympathetic one. I am concerned with the 5 million hungry people in Africa or wherever. I am concerned. Let me see a hand, please, so I'll know. Okay, there.
I've labeled these examples of stupid behavior, which perhaps isn't directly in line with the project. But to require, number one, to require that labels always be placed on ourselves and others in order to identify our acquired personality and make these false selves feel comfortable and exercise. Meet new people without applying these labels and bear the discomfort. Number two, reacting negatively to negative situations, which supports a false I by giving me an emotional kick, in quotes, and reinforces that false I. Exercise. Observe all my negative reactions and feelings. 3, criticizing others under the guise of helping them see their falseness, when I really get a feeling of superiority from doing so. I am feeding my ego to be true criticism, I must feel no emotion, just detached observation. Each time I am caught up in criticism, stop and closely observe my own inner feelings. Is emotion present? Do I recognize the same fault in myself?
Cat. Yeah, very good there.
Hurt feelings are caused by images I must hold in place. If I am angry, I am asleep. 3. Any label gives a false feeling of life.
We've talked a good deal about putting labels on ourselves. To the degree we do that, we'll put the label on the other person too, which doubles the problem, doesn't it? Because we want the other person to be the way we, in our labels, need them to be. I am a weak, wandering, suffering sinner, so I put the label God, a religious group, put a label out to a group of people and say they can save me. It's all very confused in my mind, but I'm so desperate that I'll put a label on you in order to give me the pseudo-security of believing that. So my labels, the labels I have on you, are just as dangerous as the labels I have on me. In fact, they both operate together. When I have no labels on me, I don't give you any, which means I'm seeing you clearly, whatever you are, because now I'm seeing myself clearly, whatever I am. Connie?
Loneliness is a noise that prevents us from listening to our true selves. Authority is the sheep who wears the clothing of a wolf and believes he is a wolf. Comparison and envy keep the delusions of a separate self in place.
Read the first one again, please.
Loneliness is a noise that prevents us from listening to our true selves.
That's pretty good, calling loneliness a noise, isn't it? Which it is. Look at the anguish, the noisy anguish in feeling lonely. Pretty good. Who else over on this side has something? You raise your hand, so I'll know. All right, we move. Dorothy.
I can't save anybody. I must allow another human being to suffer what he has to suffer in order to grow. Second, to allow another to use me for comfort only keeps him or her asleep. The next is, woe unto whoever fails to respond to another's flattery.
Fine, fine. Ponder for a minute what I'm going to ask you. Just deliberately delay the response. And then answer, please, by a raise of your hand. Just think about it. I'll give you 2 or 3 seconds to think about it. Then raise your hand in connection with something Dorothy just said. How many of you suffer from another's suffering? Try to see this much more deeply. And you will see, of course, that your suffering is totally false. It has nothing to do with helping the other person at all.